Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Season 6 is obviously here and out now for Warzone, and with it, we got our typical standard seasonal patch notes. In them, we saw various different buffs and nerfs to a handful of different weapons. We saw some new weapons introduced, a couple of new attachments actually as well. However, going into Season 6, there were several expectations for what the meta update and what the weapon changes were going to be like, based off some information that several devs shared with a handful of creators, myself included, prior to Season 5 going live. We were involved in a developer call previewing some of the Season 5 updates. Unfortunately, there was no Season 6 dev call, as this is the end of the year. There's not all that much to preview, I guess they thought, which is unfortunate, but nonetheless, we had these expectations going into Season 6 based off the information that was shared there. They never ended up talking about anything officially via any blogs or any other details. It was solely some of the conversation that we had in that call itself that led us to believe we were going to see various changes headed into Season 6. However, with the Season 6 patch notes being out, a lot of those changes are missing now. And I wanted to talk about what all those changes are that we are currently missing, what those updates are that are nowhere to be found, and if we're actually going to see these things change now, as we are basically approaching the end of the Warzone 3 year and the MW3 content year, and kind of in the Black Ops 6 waiting room, if you will, right? So that said, if you paid attention to some of the pre-update videos that I was posting in regards to Season 6, some of the meta expectations and what we thought was going to happen, there were several things that the developers actually outlined should be changing heading into Season 6, their words. The first of which was a change to Modern Warfare 2 snipers and them being able to one-shot knock to the head without needing any kind of ammo requirement. As I'm sure you know, if you want to use the MCPR or the Imperium or whatever, you have to use explosive rounds on there, which kill the velocity to have a chance to one-shot headshot. And that means that basically those snipers are kind of obsolete. They're all right, and you can do well with them if you're a good player, but it's nowhere near the Cat or the Moors where you could have a 900 velo and one shot at any range, or the Kar 98K and have a 900 velo and one shot at 75 meters. It's just not worth using something like an MCPR that's going to have a 600 velocity maybe at best, and then one shot headshot. It's just not going to be an ideal build whatsoever. I have seen some reports of players here and there saying, hey, I used the MCPR, I used the intervention or whatever, and I got a one-shot headshot, but I have tested this a ton in-game and plunder in an actual match, trying to figure out if there's anything weird or suspicious going on. Maybe there's a secret way you can do it without explosive ammo, and I have not found any sort of repeatable result that definitively says, hey, yeah, they actually did a stealth change here. Instead, they just made no change whatsoever. There was zero mention of any sniper updates in the Season 6 patch notes, and thus MW2 snipers are still largely obsolete. And this is the one missing meta update that I find to maybe be the strangest, just because this was basically the one direct confirmation of what was going to change with a weapon meta in Season 6, or as they head into Season 6 again, their words. The other changes that we got that we'll talk about here momentarily were a little bit more ambiguous, if you will. They were not nearly as detailed, but they did say, hey, MW2 snipers should eventually be one shot without needing an ammo requirement. So that was a big expectation going into the season. Didn't happen, obviously. As mentioned, the more ambiguous updates, they said they did want to take some time and ideally raise the tide, if you will, when it comes to a lot of underwhelming weapons. That meaning primarily Modern Warfare 2 weapons, which have been out of the meta basically since Modern Warfare 3 dropped, and then even some MW3 weapons that just don't get much attention, maybe some of the marksmans or battle rifles that are just underutilized. There's quite a few weapons there that just have never really been in the meta spotlight whatsoever, and they said, hey, maybe we are going to draw some attention to these underwhelming weapons, raise the tide, and bring them more in line with some of the top competitors right now, so you have a more broad and diverse meta across the board. It's not just a definitive 3, 4, or 5 weapons. It's maybe 10 to 15 weapons, 15 to 20 weapons that all could realistically be used, and you could find a lot of success with them because of significant buffs. They also talked a little bit about MW2 attachments and how they weren't necessarily a priority to be updated, but it is something they would like to do, as they are well aware that MW2 guns and their attachments basically mean that they're not going to be competitive even if there's a decent damage profile on an MW2 rifle or an MW2 LMG. The attachments you then have to use are so harsh with their cons or so minimal with their pros that the weapon still is just not nearly as practical as an MW3 rifle that's got no recoil and 1200 velocity or something like that, right? So all of that never really ended up changing either. We got a couple of MW2 weapon updates, and multiplayer actually got quite a few other additional ones with like actual damage changes, range updates. The Warzone patch notes were pretty limited, like the Geist getting an ADS speed buff, not really super significant, or a few other small tweaks here and there, some minor range buffs, which ultimately won't have a true impact on the meta. It was very underwhelming from the standpoint of going in, hey, we should be expecting a lot of drastic shifts here for MW2 weapons becoming more competitive, snipers becoming more viable across the board, and yet we got the patch notes and none of that was mentioned. I don't know if something changed in the season or so that went by with season 5 since we last talked to the devs and they mentioned these changes, and it's like, okay, maybe we just don't have time to get this into the game live before season 6 drops. We're just gonna have to push it back for the Black Ops 6 integration or like a random Tuesday update or something. Time is gonna tell for that, but definitely was a disappointment to go into season 6 having been told we should expect large changes and some significant updates, and then basically none of those actually came to fruition. But that wasn't all for some of the missing meta updates as well. As mentioned, no major attachment updates took place outside of a couple of new attachments being added in, but they're really exclusive to only a couple of weapons, which is a bit unfortunate. But also the meta updates that we did get seem to sort of avoid adjusting some very dominant weapons and some very overused weapons at this point, particularly in the close range meta. At least for the long range meta, sure, the STG got nerfed a little bit. Our new battle rifle, the DTIR, is going absolutely crazy, so we got a slight shift there. But then the close range meta has been dominated by the static and the Superi for basically, I think, 2 seasons now. At least all of season 5 was the exact same build like the entire time. Just not that great, very boring, very one-dimensional. And there were no changes there. There were minimal updates to a couple of SMGs that were already kind of underutilized, and those updates were not significant enough to make them, compete with the top of the top in the SMG meta or in the close range meta in general. It just seemed like there wasn't much done there. And again, we're sort of on this rinse and repeat, same meta cycle, same couple of builds and meta weapons that we've been using for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks now, to a point where it's just very monotonous, like I said, and pretty dull all across the board. So from what could have been potentially one of the most game-changing meta updates ever, at least we assumed so going into season 6, it ended up being a very underwhelming and very disappointing meta update. Now, there is a little bit of hope on the horizon, and that is just simply the fact that we see a lot of random meta updates go live here and there. Usually it's Tuesdays that include some patch note updates, and we should expect to see these happen here and there, even leading up to the end of MW3, right up into the point where I'd imagine Black Ops 6 is fully out, and then we really won't see those anymore for Warzone and MW3, at least until the Black Ops 6 integration then fully happens, of course. But that said, like just a couple of days ago, they ended up putting out a slight update that adjusted the RAL MG a little bit more, since the original season 6 patch notes were incorrect and like the update didn't actually go live for that. Then they made some additional changes to the DTIR. So like they're still actively monitoring the meta and updating things here and there. So it's quite possible that in the coming days or weeks, potentially, we do see some slight shifts here and there, but it just seems very strange from the timing of it all that this is now the reality, where leading up to this update, there was so much anticipation and so much expectation, and it's just kind of lost now. But that being said, that is going to wrap things up for this one. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating would be seriously appreciated. And if you are new to the channel, you want to guarantee that every single day you are up to date with all things going on in COD, including any potential final meta updates happening for Warzone, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.